rules for the UCP leadership race have finally come out. I shouldn't say finally, they weren't terribly delayed. They got it going in a reasonable speed, but unfortunately, it's not good. The UCP is now shed the last remnants of being a grassroots-based party with the release of these leadership rules. Now, if a person wants to throw their hat into the ring and run for the UCP leadership, they're going to have to come up with no less than $175,000 in order to do so. $100,000 of that fee plus a $25,000 deposit has to be paid by July 29th, a month and change, and the remaining $50,000 has to be paid 2 weeks later. That sort of fee for participation in what's supposed to be a democratic exercise is a slap in the face for people who value bottom-up grassroots politics. And there's good reasons for deposits and adding a cost for entry in leadership races. I'm not denying that. Leadership races are serious business, particularly when the new leader will become the premier of the province. A bar has to be set to ensure the contender is making a serious bid for the position and has the ability to reasonably contest it. It's difficult to run a race if there's over a dozen contestants in there. So, you want to kind of narrow the field. That said, too damn bad. Who said it's supposed to be easy? If we end up with 12 in there, so what? Let's have at it. May the best candidate win. The bar has never been set for a provincial race like this as ridiculously high as $175,000. In the 2017 race, contestants had to pay 2 installments of $37,500, and they had months to do it. There was also a $20,000 deposit. That totaled $80,000 less than this upcoming race and with a much longer timeline for organization and getting ready to do it. In 2017, despite the much lower bar for entry as well, only 4 candidates entered that race. It's safe to say the bar was high enough to be effective. It may, in fact, even have been too high at that time. No signatures were required from members in 2017 either, by the way. In the 2022 race, you need 1,000 signatures from members, and it's going to be required from a number of regions. Now, I'm okay with setting a high bar for petition signatures. A candidate can meet that requirement with hard work and good organization, even if they don't have a large campaign war chest. It also stops somebody who may have more money than they know what they do with, and they're just going to toss a whimsical application in for the job. There's a minimum bar of work that's going to be required. A deposit for compliance is good policy as well. I've served on leadership committees, and I know all too well what kind of stunts some campaigns can try and pull off. Having a deposit on file helps encourage good behavior on the part of the campaigns, and it gives the party a means to quietly discipline campaigns if it's required, rather than turning it into a public debacle. If a candidate is trustworthy and has good connections, they could perhaps find sponsors confident enough to front the fee, at least for the deposit, with the knowledge they'll get it back later. Now, Albertans rejected the Progressive Conservative Party because it had become too elitist and disconnected from ground-level citizens. The Wild Rose Party grew and flourished as people embraced the grassroots principles of the movement, reminiscent of the Reform Party of the 1990s. We like the idea that as members we count, and anybody can reasonably contest any position within the party, even if they aren't part of a well-heeled establishment. Much of the decline of the UCP in support in this last couple of years has been due to the top-down management style of Jason Kenney since he became premier. People felt the party had returned to the PC style of closed-door elitism, and they were right. To quote Rick Bell, Toryland had returned. In setting such a ridiculously high bar for entry into the leadership race, the UCP is demonstrating that they still don't have a clue why their support both in the polls and in grassroots financial contributions is plummeted. If they do have a clue, they're demonstrating they don't care, and I'm not sure which is worse. This does not bode well for a party reliant on strong rural support for donations and volunteers. And of course, there's urban people who value grassroots participation as well. Elitism is not going to draw back the members who had turned away because of the party's return to the old progressive conservative ways. The UCP has an opportunity to rebrand itself and rejuvenate. They could demonstrate to former supporters, and there's a lot of former ones now, that they've learned their lesson in this last 4 years, and they're going to return to the grassroots principles they sold to voters when the party was formed. Instead, the UCP is appearing tone-deaf and elitist. One can hope the new leader, and I'm not going to blame the leader candidates for this, or whoever it might be, can change this perception. For now, though, Rachel Notley's rubbing her hands together in anticipation of another term as premier, while the UCP appears as determined as ever to alienate its own support base. I'd really hoped for better.